Hello, welcome to our podcast. I'm your host Timbo and I am talking with...
Anita Horan.
Welcome, Anita.
Thanks, Tim.
Now, a little known fact about the two of us, Anita, full disclosure for people tuning in for the first time. You are my wife, we are married.
Yeah, 20 years now.
We often take separate holidays. Why is that?
Well, this started in 2012 when you let me go and swim with humpback whales. That was my first ever overseas trip, and not that you wouldn't let me go before, but we never really had the money. And then we started, I loved it so much traveling on my own, I got hooked immediately. And so I suggested that every second year we have our own dream holiday. And so you went last year. And so as soon as January ticked over, I was ready to go because it's my turn this year. And I started asking around and researching for where I should go. And then it just all happened really quickly. Within a month, I was like on the plane. It was incredible.
Right. So where did you actually go, Anita?
I went to Sri Lanka. So that's the furthest I'd ever been from home. I was actually so frightened before I left. I was like almost crying and I could barely walk. My body was trembling. It was just so far from home. I was on my own. I knew nothing really about the culture except what I'd researched, and I felt vulnerable, but I was extremely excited and full of courage at the same time.
Right. So this is unusual because most of what I discovered about your holiday was actually looking at your Instagram account and your Facebook page. So this is the first time the two of us have sat down and had an in-depth discussion about your holiday and all the things that happened to you.
Yeah, that's right. We did message each other a lot, so you weren't cut out of the loop completely. But yeah, there's a lot of details you don't know that no one really knows about the trip. So I'm really keen to fill in all the gaps about what happened, and it's a really entertaining story. So, and toward the end, it gets really hot. So I encourage everyone to listen right to the end. There's just so many amazing things I want to tell you about what I experienced during I don't even call it a trip or a holiday. It was an adventure.
Yes, I remember clearly on my way to work, I dropped you at Sydney International Airport. You'd never been to Sri Lanka before. In fact, I think you've only been overseas, is it 3 times? Is that correct?
Yeah, twice on my own, so Tonga and Bali, and then we had a family trip to Samoa.
Right, that's right. And you were actually quite nervous when I dropped you off at the airport. I would almost go as far to say that you were in terror.
Yeah, I was in a state of terror. And something that you said to me just before I left, it stuck with me the whole holiday because you could see how frightened I was. And you said, just remember, if anything goes wrong, if there's any problems, remember you can find a way out. There's always a way to fix a problem and get yourself out of it. And at the time, I didn't really think much about that advice, but you don't realise how much that advice helped me on so many occasions during my holidays. So thank you so much for saying that, Tim.
You're welcome. So what was it about Sri Lanka that attracted you? Out of all the places you could choose to go, why Sri Lanka?
Well, I had 2 friends who had just visited and they were raving about how amazing it was. And also the price was a big pull card because our dollar translates quite well there, and you can buy a meal for $3 and a coconut on the side of the road for 80 cents. So that was a draw card. And to experience a different culture, I wanted to go somewhere with a culture I hadn't had anything to do with before and open my mind further. And also it's spectacularly beautiful. The imagery you see on social media about some of the landscapes is just amazing. There's meant to be the best train ride in the world, and the 8th wonder of the world is Lion Rock, which I climbed. So there was a beauty and cheap and a different culture is what the pull cards were for me.
But when you actually arrived in the country, what was your first impression? Did it line up with all the images you saw?
Not really. And another thing that people told me is it was the friendliest place in the world. I heard this from so many different places, and that it was extremely safe. And I found the whole portrayal of Sri Lanka was a little bit touristy manufactured compared to what I actually experienced. It was noisy, it was loud, there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of dust. The men were extremely flirtatious and the women glared at you, and there was the whole experience was just a conflict of amazingness and sadness and beauty and, ugliness and incredible kindness and my safety being threatened. Pretty early on, I coined a couple of terms where one was passive kidnapping and the other is whenever something bad happens, something good will follow. And that really became a reoccurring situation throughout my entire holiday.
Just what does that mean, passive kidnapping? That's an unusual term. Can you explain to our listeners what passive kidnapping is?
I've never heard anyone else use it, but I thought it was really apt for what I experienced. So I had 4 different occasions where I say I was passively kidnapped. I found that in the Sri Lankan culture, they have a way of forcing you to do something that they want you to do with a huge smile on their face and making out it's for your benefit. So they are doing this thing for you, to help you, to make your life better, as a gift for you. And you can say that you don't want to do it, you don't want to have any part of it, it's not what you want. You can refuse and reject the situation, and they will laugh at you and say, this is happening, I'm helping you with a huge smile, laughing as they take you somewhere you don't want to go.
So kidnapping suggests that you're actually physically being taken somewhere against your will, contrary to your wishes. So can you explain how that happens? I mean, who are you talking about in this situation? Who is the kidnapper?
Well, I had 4 separate occasions and they were local Sri Lankan people. The first time I was in Colombo and I was looking for a cafe, and a man was walking along near me, and then he just started talking and being friendly and saying that his children were in Australia and asking me about Australia, and he was so incredibly friendly and he was acting like my best friend. And there are a lot of friendly people in Sri Lanka, and I'm there as a guest to their country, so I want to be kind and friendly and respectful back to them. And so I'm being friendly back, and we're walking along chatting, and I have my phone and I'm actually looking for a cafe, and I couldn't find it, so I was getting a little bit stressed, and I was just trying to look it up on Google Maps when he came along, and he actually said he knew where the cafe was. And so he's like, oh, I know where that cafe is, I'll take you there. And so he starts taking me toward what he says is the direction of the cafe, but as I'm walking along, I'm seeing Google Maps is now popping up, and we're actually walking away from where Google Maps says the cafe is. And so I say to him, I actually think it's the other way. I don't want to be rude to him. And he's like, oh, no, it's this way. Come with me, I'll show you, I'll take care of you, I'll take you right to the cafe. And then he starts saying things like, oh, you don't have to give me any money, I'll give you my address, and when you get back to Australia, you can just send me some stamps. And then alarm bells started going off, and then I'm going, I think the cafe is the other way. And he's like, no, I'm taking you to the cafe, I know exactly where it is. And then I smell alcohol on his breath, and then I'm really getting worried. And then he's about to take me across a 4-lane freeway basically, and I'm like, I'm not going across that road, I know we're going in the other direction. And I tell him it's the other way, and he's like, no, I'm going to help you. And I'm like, I've got to break free from this cord that he has on me. And then some other people came, and I used that moment to go to them, do you know where the cafe is? And they didn't know, but because the conversation was broken, I managed to just run off basically and head to where I thought the cafe was. And he's still saying, no, I know where it is, don't go. As I'm running back to the cafe and running away from him, he was that adamant. And then eventually when I took off, he reluctantly turned around and went back the way he'd come. So that was the first occasion. But that's how it's done, with words and friendliness and positivity to make you do something against your will.
So I can only imagine why he was taking you to another business.
I don't know if it was some kind of lair that I was being walked into a trap where if other people were somewhere hidden that he was going to take me to and they were going to rob me, or I actually don't know. He was a very small, older man. He didn't really would have much physical ability himself. So there was some kind of deception and manipulation going on, but I honestly don't know what it was, but it was bad. It was negative. It was something to take advantage of me and to get my money or to harm me.
So can you give me another example of passive kidnapping?
It happened immediately afterwards, because then I went back and I found the cafe, and then I found the cafe was shut, and then I looked up and I actually found that there were 2 cafes with the same name, and the one I wanted was actually far away. It was like 8 kilometers away, and it was a lot bigger, and the one I was at was tiny, and it was just like a tiny art gallery. So now I had to get to this other cafe. I'd actually arranged to meet someone there for a coffee. And so a tuk-tuk driver saw me and offered to give me a ride. And I thought he was charging a lot, so I tried to get out of it, but he persuaded/pressured me into taking his tuk-tuk. And on the way, he's like, "You don't want to go there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do want to go there. I'm arranging to meet someone for coffee. This is exactly where I want to go. This is the name of the cafe. This is the address." And he's like, "No, you don't want to go there." And I'm like, "Yes, I do want to go there." And he's like, "I want to take you. I'll take you to this other spot. If you want to buy stuff, there's this other shop that's better." And I'm like, "I don't want to go to another shop. I'm not even going to buy anything. I'm going to meet someone." And against my will, against me objecting and saying no, he actually detoured and took me to a completely separate business. I don't even know where I was. And it was like a 2-story security building with closed glass doors with a security guard out the front. And when we stopped, the security guard met me and like opened the door to let me in. And I literally said to everyone, the driver, the security guard, and the female staff member in the shop, "I don't want to be here. I'm not meant to be here. I didn't ask to come here. I don't want to be here." And they just all ignored me, and I was guided into the shop, which was a very expensive gift shop, and they shut the doors behind me, and I was basically like locked in the shop in this like high pressure sales situation. And I just looked around and I just basically left again. Luckily they let me leave. The tuk-tuk driver looked a little upset I didn't spend any money, because he was obviously getting a kickback from this shop that was just completely overpriced. So that was the second time. So I said no, and he actually took me somewhere, dropped me off somewhere with the security guard, and sent me inside when I had said I didn't want to go there.
Wow. So how did you get back to the cafe where you had arranged to meet with someone?
Well, once I left the business that he'd sent me into, he actually looked a little bit embarrassed that I hadn't gone along with his plot willingly and I hadn't spent any money. And then he was a little bit like a dog with its tail between his legs. And then he took me to the cafe.
Right. So this was your first time in Sri Lanka. You don't know anyone that lives there. So how come you had a date or an appointment to meet someone in a cafe? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, actually, I ended up meeting 2 people there. One was an environmentalist, and her name was Joanna Rudder, and she took me up to Negombo and talked about her anti-plastic activism. That was really interesting. And this occasion at the cafe, one of my followers who I've had a lot of interaction with through private messages and comments on my page sent me a message and said her husband is actually Sri Lankan and he was in the country at the time, and would I like him to take me out for a plastic-free lunch and to show me the local produce markets and show me all things non-plastic in Colombo, the capital. And I said, that would be lovely. And so I took a slight risk meeting a man I didn't know, but I did have a really good feeling about the lady that I'd been messaging, and I did trust her. And she had been involved in like environmentalism for quite a while. So I met her husband so he could show me around Colombo and be a bit like a tour guide. And when I got there and finally met him, he actually brought some friends with him. And so here I am like on day number 2 and I'm meeting 3 men in a cafe. So that was a little bit funny, but they were absolutely beautiful and they were so kind to me.
Right. So were they aware of your work, your campaign work, raising awareness about the scourge of plastic pollution? It sounds like they were sympathetic to that message already.
They had no idea who I was. They just knew that I was a friend of his wife, and they to show me around Colombo. And so, but the husband actually then pulled out his reusable kit, his reusable straw and his cutlery, and he was showing his male friends his zero waste travel kit. It was a really amazing experience to actually then see someone who his wife had influenced him, he'd adopted it, and then because I was there, he was prompted to share that message with his friends. And it was a really special moment actually. So then we actually did start talking about plastic, and I could give a little bit of my message as well.
It seems to me your work with plastic, you have the hashtag plastic free produce campaign, which you talk about on your Facebook page, on your Instagram page. The more you get known for this and the more people you connect to through it, it actually is opening up opportunities for you when you do travel overseas. It's almost like an introduction to people you wouldn't normally meet. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, it can open up dangers to you because when I went to Bali, one of my followers made contact and wanted to meet me, and he turned out, even though he was from Australia, he turned out to be a bit of a sexual lech, and he tried to have an affair with me, and he tried to break into my room at 2 a.m. So you've really got to be careful. Although you want to meet everyone and be really kind, you can't just let anyone into your life, and you have to be really careful about who you let in. So unfortunately, you have to say no to a lot of people who want to meet with you and just go with those few that you have a very good contact with and that you already know quite well and really trust.
Yeah, this is a fascinating subject because when people travel and they post photos or even video of their travels, everything is carefully filtered in terms of the best looking picture, the best looking experience. But I suspect with you, because you are such an open person and you are not one to travel to a place and just sit in a hotel or do pure touristy activities.
Samoa, I actually threw a big tantrum because we went to a resort and I wasn't able to interact with the locals, and it really distressed me. Yeah, I want to have an authentic experience and I can't bear for it to feel fabricated or like a tourist.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I am someone who is quite happy for us to keep to ourselves, but when you travel somewhere, there seems to be less barriers between you and the local people. Do you think you encounter these situations, for instance, passive kidnapping that you were talking about, because of your personality?
Oh, absolutely. I attract drama. I'm a drama magnet, and it just comes to me. So I'm just such an open person, and I almost want a tattoo on my hand, don't talk, put walls up. I always want to be less loud, less open. It's not that part of me wants to be open and welcoming, and another part of me knows it allows danger and there's too many walls down and you can be taken advantage of, and I'm trying to constantly put walls back up. But it's just my personality to want to be completely authentic and raw and not pretentious. So I keep constantly walking back into these authentic situations that allow for amazing, incredible, wonderful experiences, but also allow for people who want to take advantage of you and harm you to work their way into your life as well. So they both come together when you travel the way I do, when you want to really experience the local culture of wherever you go.
Yes, and to add even more complexity to this, we have to address this. There's your personality, an open person, but the fact that you're a woman is an added layer of complexity, because women travelling on their own often have a different experience of a place or even a person than if they were travelling with a companion. The dynamic changes immediately for them.
That's right. And the people who I knew that travelled that recommended Sri Lanka, one of them travelled with a male companion and in very expensive accommodation. So they had a very different experience, and they said Sri Lankans are the most friendly people in the world, and I work out now it's because they were staying in expensive places and the service was incredible, so they only experienced beautiful interaction. And the other people who recommended it, they went as a group, and so they had the safety of the group. And so they had a very different experience again, but going on my own, it was definitely a different experience. And being a woman, there are definite vulnerabilities, and as I mentioned, the men really target women in general, but white skinned women even more so. So when I first got on the train to go to Colombo, I was the only white person on the train and everyone was looking at me. And in Colombo, when I was walking around the markets, everyone was looking at me. I was the only white person there, and I was a woman. I stood out so much. I went immediately and bought what I thought was a local outfit, so I didn't have my denim shorts and t-shirt. I just tried to blend in a bit more, but still, you can't change the colour of your skin. And I have an arm tattoo, and I'm a girl, so everyone was just looking at me. I couldn't hide. There was so much attention. I would walk down the street and men will come up and go, "Are you married? Where are you from?" And this became a recurrent issue. People would actually approach you and go, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from? What's your name? Are you married? Are you on your own?" And so and you would be fending off this male interest constantly.
Yeah, what's alarming about this subject is I want to just talk about your trip to Bali before circling back. There was someone who knew you through your work on social media. You met up with them in Bali. I actually know who this person is.
He knew you.
Yeah, he knew me. I'd love to name and shame him, but I've since found out that another woman, another female, has had a very negative experience with this person as well. Yet my interactions with him have always been in the setting of being with other men. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but quite often I hear stories about men I have met from women, but the women have a completely different experience with that man than I do. And this just seems to be a recurring issue, not only for women travelling, but women interacting with men they feel they know from social media or a group setting, but then when they're with them one-on-one, the experience is negative.
It's complex because like this person's social media presence is like really positive, and I accidentally stumbled across a post by him the other day, and he was like inviting people to a gathering he'd ordered. It sounded so lovely, and like he had said so many complimentary things on my page, even about our relationship, positive things about our relationship. And in person he was very friendly, and this is what I find is like there's this immense amount of friendliness and flattery. So then when it starts taking a turn, like condoms falling out of his bag when we went for a dive, like how do you suddenly turn from this positive friendliness into going, well, why are there condoms in your bag when you know you're meeting a married woman? Like, how do you suddenly turn, and then you're in a foreign country and they know where you're staying? How do you like end a relationship when the alarm bells start going off? I don't actually know how to navigate that aspect of it when someone presents themselves as being on your side and then slowly, with a smile, starts to try to take advantage of you.
Right, just to clarify that, when you said that this person was saying positive things about our relationship, what you were actually saying is this man was actually saying positive things about your relationship with me, correct?
Yeah, well, on my social media pages, we post about each other sometimes. We never plan it, but sometimes we do a post about each other and say nice things. And he'd left comments saying, oh, I would love to like find a partner where there was this much love in the relationship between myself and the other person. So he'd actually like commented and commended us on our devotion and love for each other, and then he tried to get me to have an affair with him and destroy our marriage.
Right, yeah, he's quite a character, this guy. Anyway, so back to Sri Lanka. We'll circle back to some of the dangerous things or alarming things that happened, but a big part of this trip was obviously you gathering intelligence or information about what the situation in Sri Lanka was with plastic waste and plastic pollution.
Well, yeah, it was a personal holiday / adventure, but no matter what I do in my life, I can't switch off my plastic awareness, and I want to learn as much as I can and have as much of a positive influence as I can. So I did dedicate an entire day to be with another environmentalist and learn about plastic, and throughout the whole journey I was photographing plastic and using my own reusable straws and bags and trying to influence people. Oh, like on like day number 2, when I was about to catch the train back home to my accommodation, and I was really, really hungry and tired, and I was searching for a restaurant. I found this place and I looked and you could eat in. So I said, okay, I asked for an eat-in meal so I could use no plastic or no cutlery or anything. And then it was put at my table in front of me, and it was wrapped in like layers of plastic. So they instead of having a takeaway plastic container, what they have is they have a cardboard box, but then they have sheets of plastic, and they wrap the hot food in these sheets of plastic. So like the chemicals are all leaching into your hot rice, these toxic chemicals, and then you've created plastic pollution. And they put it in a plastic carry bag and give you plastic cutlery. So that was pretty hard to take. So yeah, so there were some things that were pretty upsetting, but you know, it's all around the world. Like all nations are using this much plastic. It was just a different way of presenting it. I hadn't seen the plastic sheets before for takeaway food.
Right, so what would have you said the highlight of your trip? What really sticks in your mind in terms of experiences?
Oh, there are a lot of beautiful experience. The mostly was with the people that I met, where they were just amazing people. Like the husband my page follower. That was an amazing experience. He was lovely and showed me around Colombo and so much hospitality and generosity, and that was wonderful. And Candy, I found an Airbnb that had lots of nice reviews, and a lady called Kalyani. And when I first got there, she just sat down and had a cuppa and was asking me about my life and what I do for work. And I said, I care for aged people. And we started swapping notes about the aged care industry and aged people in Australia versus Sri Lanka. And then I said, I would really love to meet some aged people here. And she thought about it for a minute and she said, if you really want to do something good, what we would do is we'd have a big curry cooker and we'd deliver it to some very poor old people. And I just thought that was the best suggestion I'd ever heard in my life. And then the next day I talked about it again and she seemed a little bit reserved, and I was like, oh, are we still doing that? And then she told me it was going to cost a certain amount of money, and I already had hardly any money. I could hardly afford the holiday myself. And so I was like, oh, I can only afford a little bit. And she's like, oh, well, for that we can just feed a few people. And I said, okay, we'll do that. And then it was just bugging me like anything that I didn't have enough money to feed more people. And so I actually put a call out on my social media channels, and I didn't tell Kalyani. And I said, I'm going to do this. We're going to make some food for some aged people. If anyone else wants to pitch in, it'll help buy food. And I got about 4 donations, and we ended up having about 4 times the amount she originally suggested. And I was saying to her, I got another donation. And in the end, I had like this wad of cash. And so we spent the day, we went to the markets and we bought all this food, and I've just got the cash and I'm paying for everything, and she's going around and choosing it all from all these different stalls. And then we were going from like 10 a.m. We didn't get back until about 6 p.m. And in the end, they decided, she found a facility that was for very, very poor aged people. And she said because it was such short notice, they already had their curries and meals prepared, but we were invited to provide afternoon tea and to provide rations for the next week. So that's what we did. We went to a bakery and bought these beautiful buns with like a fish curry in the middle and a couple of other things. So they had this beautiful afternoon tea. And then we bought all these supplies, rice and tea and Panadol and lots of other things that would be rations, so they could... and chicken. We bought like 10 kilos of chicken, which was a luxury for them because they would hardly ever get to have meat. And so that was like a real special thing for them as well. And so that was an absolute thrill. And thank you so much to those other people who donated to these goods. And to be with these aged people, I really want to write a blog post because I want to show the photos. I have so many beautiful photos from Sri Lanka and of this aged care home. And the people were just beautiful, like holding hands and cuddling them. And a couple of them sang for me. It was absolutely beautiful. It was very rushed. And I was like, oh, I wish I had longer with them. That's the only thing I had regretted. But then another opportunity arose at the very end of my trip, which I'll tell you about later, where I was able to make up for that lack of time we had on that particular day.
Yeah, I find this intriguing. I just can't imagine many other people whose day job, an aged care worker like yourself, but then going on holiday and then choosing to seek out the elderly in another country.
I think that now that I only became an aged care worker about 2 years ago, and now that I'm in the industry, that even doesn't sound like the right word, industry, because they're real people, and mostly they're lonely, and with the loneliness they become a bit sad, and they've got health issues. A lot of them feel rejected, and so you only have to give like such a small amount of time to an elderly person who's lonely to just put so much light in their life. And so I knew that even just to spend an hour with a group of people, if I could let them know that they're valuable individuals and that they're special and that someone sees them and notices them. So every person, I would hold their hands and I would look into their eyes and I would swap names, and I would have a short conversation while looking them directly in their eye. And like, they will probably hold on to that feeling of worthiness for a long time. And so how can you not do that when you have it in your power to make someone feel really good about themselves. Like I could just do that every day of my life. Like it's actually a blessing. And then when I left, 2 of them came to the window, and it was this beautiful, it had blue bars with these beautiful awnings next to it, and they were like waving and smiling, and I've got a photo of it, and it just makes it all worth it.
Yeah, I think we should have a link to some of those photos in the show notes, because when I saw them like starting to appear on your channels, I was blown away, yet at the same time I wasn't surprised because I know who you are, and I just think this is an example of you, because you're so open. Well, can have negative experiences because people feel they can take advantage of you, but you also have these incredible experiences as well because you're not shut off to the possibility of them.
That's right. And if you like open yourself to kindness and love, it will flood back to you, which was definitely my experience in Sri Lanka. There was so much kindness and beautiful people and love. And if I was open to it, it came to me. And if I offered it, it was appreciated and reciprocated. But those same mechanisms are what allowed for some dangerous situations to develop in my holiday as well.
Before we explore that further, I would say it's a frustrating situation because elephants are in Sri Lanka. Yeah. It's not unusual to see an elephant, and you were curious to find out more about elephants, but this sort of blew up into, I don't know if you would say incident, but it was like another example of where people who dislike something you're doing become very vocal on your Facebook page. Yeah, let's talk about the elephants. What happened there?
Okay, so one of the areas I went to, Sigiriya, was really beautiful. And one of the tourist opportunities there are elephant rides. And the pictures look really great. And it looks really tempting, to be honest. Like, what a great pic on the back of an elephant. A part of me was contemplating it, but part of me knew that I don't really think I could do it. And my daughter is a vegan, and at 12, she's an animal rights activist. And I knew that she'd be pretty mortified if I did. So I thought what I would do before I even made any decisions, and like I tell everyone on my page, anyone who's been following me, they know I don't promote myself as an all-know-it environmentalist. I tell people I knew nothing. Like, I came into this 3 years ago with no environmental knowledge at all about anything, and I just started learning about plastic. So please don't expect me to know about every industry and issue there is, especially animals. I didn't know anything about animals as regards treatment or cruelty. Anyway, so I put a post on my page and I said, please don't judge me, but can anyone tell me about elephant rides? Just give me some information, please. And a lot of people were really against it and posting videos and stories about how cruel it is. And then I made a decision I wouldn't do it. And I promised my vegan daughter that instead of having an elephant ride, I would actually do a post about elephant rights. And I saw something. I saw an elephant being washed by his carer. Sorry, I forget the correct name. There is a correct term for that. And the elephant was being scrubbed in water. And the man was yelling instructions that the elephant understood. And then the elephant slowly stood up, and then I saw its back feet were chained together. And I saw it lift up chains and put chains over its own head. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen, to see a huge, powerful animal put chains on itself so that the man could lead it to do whatever it was. I saw elephants lifting big logs, and there were the elephant rides. And anyway, that particular experience of seeing a huge animal chain itself while having its back feet chained, it really touched my heart. And so I did a post about it. I took photos and I did a post about it, and this blew up on my page, and there was like an all-out fight between the people who thought it was cruel to domesticate animals and to have them as elephants and to have them as workers. And there was an extremely vocal few people who said that was all a lie and it was fabricated and there's no cruelty with training elephants, and it's a very loving relationship between the trainer and the elephant. But the opinions were so aggressive, and I actually wasn't getting involved. I've learned that I can't really talk about animals much on my page because people get so upset no matter what you're saying. If you mention animals in any way, people are very emotional. And And I didn't even get involved in the argument. I was just watching it all appear and everyone providing evidence and articles and videos that completely conflicted with the other ones. But one of the sides, surprisingly not the side you would think, was being extremely aggressive and volatile and nasty and name-calling and saying, you just believe lies, and then turned it on me and started personally attacking me and saying I'm going to unfollow you and this is self-indulgent, and started sending me private messages from multiple accounts telling me what an awful self-centered person I was. And they wouldn't let it end. They wouldn't just go, well, I said something nasty, I'm going to stop now. They just kept sending me messages and kept leaving comments and insulting me personally, telling me what a horrendous person I was because I did a post about an elephant putting chains on it himself. And this was all happening while I was like having my holiday, my adventure overseas. It was pretty upsetting, to be honest.
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff for me. So just to be clear, the person or people that really singled you out for special treatment, they weren't objecting to your photo of the elephant in chains. So these people attacking you thought there was nothing wrong with elephants being in chains. Let's just be clear about that.
And that the elephant could have been perfectly happy, and the wording I used to say the elephant did not look happy was very distressing for them to hear. The elephant could have been perfectly happy. Yeah, that was the problem they had.
Yeah, so really, if you have a public platform like yourself and you have quite a few followers, like no matter what you say, like the crazies are going to show up and persecute you.
Yeah, like you really are quite vulnerable if you have a lot of followers on social media, because people will attack you. And she kept telling me she had been a loyal follower of mine for a long time, and yet she was being nastier to me than like nearly anyone had been. So, it's not always, sometimes, even your followers can turn on you. And I hadn't even done anything. I wasn't even really taking sides. I was just letting the debate happen with me. I wasn't even going into it and like siding with anyone. But it just was like a war on my page.
And you talk about plastic pollution, it's your page, that's your message, people respond to it. But as soon as you deviate slightly from it and try to look at an even bigger picture, things get out of control really quickly.
Really quickly, that's right. And people have very strong opinions. So yeah, if ever I talk about other issues, like, it just blows up.
But having said that, I found it quite heartening that the people that were sympathetic and had empathy to the elephants, they seemed to be, the comments from them were the nicer ones.
Were the nicer ones, yeah.
Whereas the people who were pro elephant slavery, not to mince words, they seemed to be the nastiest ones.
That was the case in those particular posts, yes.
Okay, so where else did you go to in Sri Lanka? I noticed some of the pictures, it looked like you hiked up a big mountain to see some ruins or something.
So after I left Colombo, I had booked a private driver for 4 days, and one of the people who had recommended I go to Sri Lanka actually wanted me to have a private driver because they knew I couldn't afford it, and some of the areas are quite hard to get to. So that was most of that was actually gifted to me by a follower and friend. So thank you very much. You know who you are. So first of all, I went to Enuradapura, which is an ancient ruin site a little up north. And they have stupas, and they are a big white, usually they're white, sometimes they're concrete colour, dome. And when I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go check that out and see what's inside. But no, what they do is actually have a few sacred relics, and they put it in the middle, and they build these enormous domes called stupas over the top. And so these are sacred places, but you can't go in, and you can only walk around. And there's this statue of Buddha, and people make an offering, which is usually little fresh flowers. And there were a lot of old ruins there as well. So that was the first place. And then I went to Sigiriya, where, there were two big rocks. So one's called Lion Rock. Then there's another rock as well, which is just as big, but it's doesn't have any ruins on the top. And then you can climb to the top. I actually did both. So one's really expensive. It's like $45, and the other one's like $5. And I did one day and one the other. And if you go, I actually recommend doing both, because the one with the ruins is extremely crowded. There are people everywhere, but it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. They built almost like a mini city up on top of this rock, and it's just unbelievable that it could even happen. It's a very hard climb. There's a first aid tent halfway up, and that's amazing. But the other rock is a bit easier. It's not as expensive. There are no ruins on the top, but the view's better. So you get to see across to Lion Rock and see the top of the ancient city. So they're both really beautiful to do. And I did a village tour, which was really nice, going on a boat and having a meal cooked from scratch from locally grown produce, and the cooking was sensational. And then I went to Kandy, where I had the opportunity to visit the aged care home. And then I had heard that between Kandy and Ella is the most beautiful train ride in the world. So I made sure I did that. And to be honest, I was a little disappointed because it had such rave reviews and the photos are so spectacular of it. But to be honest, in reality, it's a 6-hour trip, and maybe 45 minutes of that is the view that you see on social media. So yes, it was beautiful, but it wasn't beautiful for the whole 6 hours. A lot of it was just shrubbery, and the first hour was just getting out of the city. But I'm glad I did it, and it was really pretty. And then in Ella, I had planned to do, there's like huge mountain climbs, and you're meant to start at 2 a.m. and watch the sun rise and then walk back down, and they're meant to be excruciating and you're shaking for days. But I actually got really sick, and I've had lots of problems with my throat over the last month. Actually, I was in tears before I left because I thought, if I get sick over there and end up in hospital, how am I going to deal with that? And when I was there, I actually did lose my voice, and my throat was really playing up, and that happened when I was in Ella. So I decided not to do the rock climbs, and I had a prowl outside my room in the middle of the night. My room was really isolated, and when I had checked in, there was this man. He looked like a big Russian wrestler. He was enormous. He was like 6'6" and built like a house. And I later found out that he actually had the room adjacent to mine, and our two rooms were kind of together in a very dark, secluded area. No one would have heard me if I screamed, and I couldn't scream anyway because I didn't have my voice. And I heard what I believe is him outside my room in the middle of the night, and I saw a torch flash, and I heard him trip over the stairs. So that was pretty darn scary, and I checked out the next morning and left Ella early.
Right, so where did you go to after Ella?
So I went to Tissa. So there's a safari at Yala National Park. That was not something that I thought was going to be a highlight of my trip, but it ended up being. So Yala National Park was not really that what I expected. The park itself is just beautiful, and it's a wonderful home for all the animals, but there weren't that many animals to be found. I don't know if it's always like that or if it was just quiet on the day we went. And at one point we were told there was a bear in a bush, and we just stopped and we were just looking at a stationary bush for 30 minutes and we never saw a bear. I mean, there was a lot of driving around and not seeing many animals, but in the end I got enough photos to make a really nice social media post. But there was a lot of not seeing anything. But for me, the unexpected highlight was recommended that I do a bike ride around Tissa, and my accommodation had free bike hire, and that was a highlight. So I went for a bike ride and I got completely lost. I didn't know where I was. There were rice fields and this big snake crossed the road in front of me, and the locals thought it was hilarious that I was terrified, but I was on a bike and there was a 3-meter snake on the road and they're laughing their heads off. And then this magical experience happened where there's like a man-made creek, and all the locals came down at dusk and they brought their food with them, and they were playing and bathing and laughing and splashing, and they had music playing, and there was this beautiful atmosphere as everyone, the whole village came down to play in this creek. And then I saw this beautiful lake at dusk. It was just gorgeous, although there was just plastic everywhere, which is really hard to take. And I kept asking people where the accommodation, it was called La Safari Inn. And then eventually I was told I should be back before dark. And it started getting dark and I started getting a bit worried. And this man on a motorbike came along and he asked if he could help me. And everyone had been sending me in this one direction whenever I asked. And it turns out they were all sending me the opposite way. So either they were having fun with me or they were sending me to Safari Inn, not La Safari Inn, because there were two places with almost the same name. And anyway, this guy on a motorbike, he decided to be absolutely beautiful and to rescue me. and to show me my way back home. And so then he got me to follow him back to my place. But I'd actually, by that stage, I resorted to Google Maps and I found it. And I'm like, it's okay, thank you, I've got a map now. But again, he ignored that I didn't really need his help anymore. And he just kept following, he just kept leading the way. And, what could I do? I said no thank you when he kept leading the way. So all I could do was follow him and be grateful. He was doing the right thing. He didn't get me lost. And that was very, very sweet of him. And I saw a homeless man and I gave him a bit of money, and I saw where he lived was really unkempt and dirty. And then the next day I decided to go back and I took a hot meal to him, and I tried to clean up the mess, and I was unable to clean it up because a lot of it was very contaminated waste, liquids in bottles that I didn't know what the liquid was. A lot of it was slimy plastic with filth on it, and a lot of the plastic was embedded into the ground. And he was nearly blind, so I think people give him food and drink, but then he can't clean up and no one thinks to clean up. And he's just kind of living in this putrid mess. And it was really quite devastating to then have to leave him there without having been able to retrieve a lot of the rubbish that I had intended to. And then I saw other beggars further up that hoped to get money and food from me, and I didn't have enough to give to everyone, and I left kind of feeling really heartbroken.
So this man was literally living on the side of the road. He didn't even appear he had any shelter.
Oh, no shelter. And it was quite a busy road too. And yeah, he's just living on the side of the road.
Wow. So where did you go to after this? Was Tissa, yeah?
That was Tissa, yeah. And so then I'd heard about Tengal, which was going to be the beginning of the relaxing part of... So all the other stuff, it was really hard. It was inland, it was dusty, it involved walking. But my treat was to finish along the coast, the south coast. And there's Tengal, Marissa Gall, and you can work your way back to Colombo. And so I went to Tengal, and it was really pretty on the beach, but where the accommodation I booked, I didn't really like it when I got there. My room was downstairs and it said beach views, but it was a really dirty beach and it was really dark, and I felt very insecure the thought of being in that room on my own at night, and I didn't like how unsafe and vulnerable I was, so I actually decided not to stay there. And I did Mission Invisible Extraction, I call it. I went for a walk. I had actually met someone on an elephant safari, and my Jeep fell apart and I had to jump in a Jeep with someone else. And this person was 2 days ahead of me for the rest of the trip. And I knew they stayed somewhere nice in Tengal. So I asked them where they stayed, and they gave me the name of the place. And so I went right up the other end of the beach. It was 2 kilometres away, and I found it, and I booked in. And then I had to go all the way back to my accommodation to get my bags. I changed my clothes so the lady wouldn't recognise me because she was so sweet. I didn't want to upset her. And then got all my bags, and I left money in the room for the one night, so she got paid, and I sent her a nice message, and then I made my way back up to the other accommodation, which was the nicest place I'd stayed the whole time, because I was staying in $10 accommodation, and this place was $100 a night, which was a big spoil for me, but I wanted to do something nice and I wanted to be safe, so I thought I would do that. And on the way, I had 2 tuk-tuk drivers approach me. One of them was like, "Where have you come from?" And I'm like, "Ella." And he's like, "I can't hear you." I'm like, "Ella, I can't hear what you're saying." And so he's playing this game where he's pretending he can't see me to close the gap between us because we're on opposite sides of the road. So he's kind of luring me into his world. And this is what a lot of the tuk-tuk drivers do. They want to develop a friendly relationship with you so that they can get a booking with you and try and get some money from you. And I was friendly because, they're friendly. There's music. It's smiling. The people aren't walking along being aggressive. They're being really friendly, and you're on holiday, so you be friendly back. And then when he asked if I was with a group or on my own, I said, "I think I'm going to keep walking now." And I left him. And then further up, there was cafes everywhere, and someone said, "Oh, do you want to come in and buy a drink at our cafe?" And I'm like, "You know what? I'm really hot and thirsty. I've just walked 4 kilometres. Yep, I'm going to stop and get a drink." And then another tuk-tuk driver was really, really friendly, and he's trying to get me to, acting like your best friend. He's trying to get me to book tours, and he's starts touching my arm a bit too affectionately for someone that I've just met. And so I actually had his number to book him for the tours. And then I was like, "You know what? I'm not going to do that. He's already acting too familiar with me." I'm going to start afresh with a new tuk-tuk driver who doesn't know me. I'll try and find someone I feel safe with. So then I went back and I checked into my room with all my bags. And this place had a really weird vibe. There was actually no reception desk. You just kind of walked. There were really nice cabanas on the beach, 2-story. So someone rented the bottom, someone rented the top, freestanding. It was like really quiet. Like the woman receptionist, she was like the most awful person I'd come across my entire holiday. And she just glared at you. Even when I went to book a room, she just glared at me like I was an annoyance. And there were no lights downstairs. It was really quite scary to walk around. And the lock on the outside of my door didn't work properly. And I had to get the staff to help me numerous times because I actually couldn't get into my own room. And the first night was fine. And then the next morning I had decided I had heard there were like 3 tours to do in the area. And I decided that I would just do one of them, which was to go up to this beautiful temple. And then you keep walking and you go up to this rock and you watch a really beautiful sunset. And because I'd missed the big walks at Ella because I was sick, I thought that was a really easy way to get a similar experience. So this was, you leave at 4 and you watch the sunset and then you come back. So
what you're referring to as the tuk-tuk drivers seem to be a recurring issue. Can you just explain to the listeners what a tuk-tuk is?
Oh, yeah. So I think another name for it is a rickshaw. They're really cute. So there's 2 wheels at the back and 1 wheel at the front. And it's like a mini, between a bicycle, a motorbike and a car. So, and they're motorised and they're everywhere. And it's a really cheap form of travel. And a lot of men have this as a job. They either buy a tuk-tuk or they rent a tuk-tuk and that's their job, like a taxi service.
But this is a recurring issue, you negotiating with the tuk-tuk drivers.
Yeah, well, some of them are metered like a taxi and others aren't. And so if they're not metered, then it's like a negotiation. But they're often really slippery and they won't give you a direct amount up front. Or like one time I was caught and I was quoted like what would have been $30. And then I ended up going a bit further and stopping a couple of times. And instead of just adding like an extra $10, he when I got off, he's like, well, you went all this way and we stopped, and he doubled the price to like $60, which I thought was completely excessive for having just used the tuk-tuk for a little longer. And yeah, and often they will actually not give you a price. I'll go, well, I want to know how much this is going to be. And they'll go, I'll give you a good price. I like you. I look after you. I'll give you a good price. And often they will actually try to get you to book a tuk-tuk service when you don't even need one. So they're just desperate to get your work.
Back to your new accommodation, you'd left the previous one because you didn't feel safe, you felt it was dark and dingy, you slipped away, but you left money for the previous host and you have come to this new place that's by the beach, yes? Is that correct?
Yeah, right on the beach.
Right, but you've identified this place because someone you met a few days ago...
Solo male traveller stayed there and had a great time.
Okay, and so a recommendation is always a great thing, so this is why you're in this new place.
And I did actually and they kept popping up when I was doing booking.com searches. The name kept popping up, but I had dismissed it because it was one of the more expensive ones. And then I decided to read the reviews, and the reviews were really good. So yeah, a personal recommendation and then good reviews on booking.com up the top. And so yeah, I was like really confident that this was going to be the best and safest places I would stay in my entire trip.
Okay, can you actually specify the name of this place? It's available on booking.com.
I could, but I won't do it in this podcast because I haven't quite decided if I'm going to go public with the name yet, because I'm going to be making police report and I don't know if I'm allowed to go public yet. So I'll keep that a bit ambiguous for the moment.
What the hell is this about? You've left your previous accommodation. You've gone to an idyllic looking spot on the beach. There's cabanas overlooking the beach. The only real negativity is there seems to be a surly receptionist. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes. And no pleasant atmosphere at all between the staff. It's very quiet. And the next morning I had breakfast and I had decided to do the tour in the afternoon. I was only there for one day. And one of the waiters was there and I called him over and I said, can I please ask some information? I want to book this tuk-tuk tour and I also want to book a tuk-tuk to go to Marissa the next day, which was my next destination. Can you just tell me how I can arrange to book a tuk-tuk. And he said, oh, I'm a tuk-tuk driver. I can take you. And I thought, oh, well, that's perfect. Like the tuk-tuk driver that works for the accommodation, the expensive accommodation where I'm staying, that would by far be the safest option to go, a trusted long-term employee. So I said, great. And he was really friendly and happy. And so I booked him to meet me at 4:00 that afternoon to take me on a tour to the temple and to see the sunset and return, which was leaving at 4, and I guess it was going to get back around 7.
7 in the morning.
No, sorry, 7 that night. So, just like a 3 or 4 hour tour.
Right. So how did that go for you?
Well, he was extremely friendly. He was possibly the friendliest, most outgoing, funny person I met in Sri Lanka. But with all his friendliness, from the moment he picked me up, he said that he wanted me to have a good time in Tangal and we were going to have a party at my room that night. The way I say it, it makes it sound sinister, but the way he said it, it was so playful. And so he took the angle that the day before, I actually bought a bottle of tonic water because I wanted to use their reusable glass bottles, and tonic water was one of the only things I could buy in glass. So I bought a bottle of tonic water, and for the first time the whole trip, I actually sat and I just watched the beach for 2 hours. But I didn't know that this guy was watching me and he was targeting me. I was oblivious to it. And so when I was on the tuk-tuk, he brought up the tonic that I drank. Oh, you had gin and tonic yesterday. And I said, no, actually, I didn't have any gin. I only had tonic. And he's like, oh, you like gin and tonic? And I said, yeah, I like gin and tonic. But drinks are really expensive in Sri Lanka because twice I bought alcohol and both times they were very expensive and you couldn't even taste the alcohol. So I decided I was just going to go for like soft drink and coconut water. And then he used this as an in to say, well, I'll take you to a liquor store and I'll get you to buy gin really cheap compared to if you went and bought a cocktail. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't even know how I answered that, but I think I was like, oh, is that cheap to buy it at a local liquor store? Anyway, he ran with this concept of me buying gin, and we'd have gin and tonic, and he would have weed, and he kept using this phrase, we're going to go to the moon. We go to moon, we go to moon. So he wanted us to smoke weed and to go to the moon on the weed and for me to buy the gin, and we'd have gin and tonic, and this would happen at my room when we got back. And it was so playful, and he was just laughing, and I kept saying no, I don't want to do that. No, we do. I want to show you a good time. And again, it's just like passive kidnapping where it's so positive, it's so friendly, it's all about giving you something that's a gift to you, this wonderful thing I'm going to do to help you out, because you need to have a good time and I want you to have a good time and I want to give you this gift. And so that's a complete context, and he's laughing and laughing the whole time. And by this stage, we're in a remote area. I'm in his tuk-tuk. I'm on my own. So I didn't really feel I had much of a choice except to say no in a playful tone back to him, because I didn't want it to turn nasty in some remote area, in some remote country. And so I'm just being laughing and happy and saying no and refusing. And every time I say no, he just refuses my refusal. Yeah, so he was even using, and I'd say, no, I don't want to. And I'm like, I've never smoked pot in my life. I'm not going to smoke it now. And he was absolutely insistent I was going to smoke his weed. And when I'd say no, he even said, that's impossible. As in, it's impossible for it not to happen. He's making sure that it will happen because I need to have this party because it's going to be good for me.
So what happened next? Did you stop at like the liquor store? Did he eventually take you back to the resort? Well,
it was quite a long tour. I was his captive audience from 4 p.m. So we went up to the temple, which was beautiful, and I don't know if it was creepy or insistent or friendly, but he kept taking photos of me with my phone, which I didn't really, that's actually kind of helpful. But anyway, so there was all this photo taking, and I was being blessed by monks on the way up, and he was really respectful of the monks, and I gave donations, and he was like very complimentary about me giving donations, and he was taking the blessings like a good Buddhist man and respecting the monks. And then we go up and we're watching the sunset, but we're a bit early. So we're there for about 40 minutes before the sun actually sets. And he starts like sitting really close to me and like rubbing his shoulder like playfully against me. And I was like, oh. And eventually I kind of went and sat in front of him and he just took photos of me from behind. But it was all overly familiar, overly friendly. I don't know any friends that I have known for years that would be as all over me as he was. Extremely flirtatious and forward and playful, but never mentioned verbally that there was any sexual advances going on. But, you know, he was sidling up to me and getting close physically and clearly flirting with me. And then the sun was about to go down. I'm really glad there happened to be some other people that were watching the sunset on the same night, or he might have tried something up on the rock. And it was in a very dangerous spot. There was no railings at all. If you went over the edge, you were dead. So I'm really glad there were people there, because I don't know what would have happened up there. And we got back safely. But just imagine, like, pretty much every minute for the entire time I'm in his company, he's saying, I'm taking you to buy gin, I'm getting weed, we're going back to your room and we're going to have a party. It was like on repeat, non-stop, for the entire time I was in his company. And then I was trying to, and as we're getting closer back to, and so he stopped and basically forced me to buy the gin. And it was really scary because it was in a side alley and there were just all these like Sri Lankan alcohol drinkers around the liquor store, and they just all turned and they were just all looking at me. And he's like arranging to buy alcohol, and he gets all this extra alcohol for other things too. I don't even know if he's like getting me to pay for other alcohol he's buying. I couldn't even tell. And then, then he gets me to pay for the gin, and then we go and get the tonic. And then I actually asked him to stop because I met a family that I promised to have breakfast with, a poor local family. And I said, can we please go to the grocer? And I went and bought some fresh produce for this family that I was going to donate the next day. And then as we get back closer, he says, I'm going to go and I'm going to have a shower and I'm going to get my weed. And why don't you shower? And anyway, alarm bells just like going boom, boom in my head. I was like, hang on, he wants me to shower. I'm actually not dirty. Why does a man want me to have shower when he's about to come back to my room? And I said, and I'm like, he will not. And I kept saying no, and he kept saying that's impossible for this not to happen. And so then I'm trying to like be strategic. How do I get out of this situation? And so then I think, well, instead of you going home and having a shower and getting your weed, like, why don't we just quickly have a drink now? And then I'm really tired. I don't want to stay up late. I don't want to do this. I just want to go to bed early. Let's quickly have a gin and tonic now, and then you can go and not come back. And he's like, that's impossible. I'm coming back. And I was like, oh my God. And so I'm completely freaking out at this point. And then he drops me off and he goes to shower and get his weed. And I run up to my room because I've got stuff everywhere. It's a mess. And so I'm hiding all my underwear, all my valuables. I'm putting everything in my bag so that if he doesn't like see anything that could indicate anything personal about me. And then when I put everything away, I made sure the windows were locked and checked the lock on the front door. And then I'm like, you know what? The receptionist is a horrible cow, but I have no other choice for safety. There's no one else I can go to. I'm going to just make myself do something I hate doing and go and talk to someone who is extremely unfriendly. It's like one of my worst hates in my life is dealing with unfriendly people. But I'm going to make myself do it for my safety. There's no other plan B. And so I quickly go down to reception and I'm standing and I approach her and she just like glares at me from her desk in the restaurant, and I'm about to do it. I'm about to say, this guy's invited himself back to my room and I don't want him to come. And just as the words are about to come out of my mouth at this glaring woman, he appears next to me and he's standing there. It was like out of a movie. And I'm like, how the hell did you go and shower and get weed and get back here in that time? It's like he teleported. It's like he knew I was going to say something, and I couldn't believe that he could get there so quickly. And I just froze, and I looked around and all the staff in the restaurant had all frozen and they were all just looking at me. And so I didn't know if this was a regular plot that they were all part of, and they were all complicit in it, and he had fulfilled his role and they were supporting him with their silence by not giving me anyone to talk to, or if they just thought that he was lucky and he'd scored with a foreign woman and they were in awe of him. I don't know what their thought process was, but they clearly were not there to offer me a safe place or a way out. And everyone just glared at me, and I just had a look of horror. I was absolutely terrified, and not one person asked me if I was okay, or the receptionist asked me what I wanted to say, even though I was standing there to talk to her. She just glared at me with silence, and I felt I had zero options. They were clearly his friends and on his side, and I was just like a defeated woman. And I just walked out into the darkness. I didn't even talk to him. And he followed me back to my room.
This is awful experience. You're on your own. You're not travelling with anyone. So how did you navigate the next section of this horror story?
And the place was actually at the far, far end of the beach in Tangol. There was nothing past it, and there was a big gap before it, so you weren't surrounded by other places you could go for safety. You were isolated, and so I just really sadly walked back to my room, and he followed me even though I was clearly distressed. And he went back into his playful mode and followed me upstairs to my room. And I had been very strategic in case he did come back. And I set it up outside. So I had cups outside. I had everything outside. So there was no reason for us to go into our room because I didn't want him to come into the room. And so I had us on the balcony. And at that point, I felt, like if you're kidnapped and you don't want to be harmed, my best play was to go along with it and to be a gracious host and to not trigger him with whatever his intention was. So I was just very friendly, and we had our drinks and were talking, and I watched very carefully the amount of alcohol. I poured the first one and just a very, very small amount of gin to a big glass of tonic. I had lots of tonic and we were diluting it. And I watched him pour the next one. And the same, I said, how much are you pouring? And like the same very small amount of gin to a big glass of tonic. And then, just really friendly, just everyday banter. And then he handed me a glass, and I kind of let my guard down, and at that point, and he'd started being really complimentary. He'd worked out that I'd bought the food as a gift for a poor family, and so he was at that point being really, really kind to me and saying, "Oh, Sri Lanka's so lucky to have you. We are so blessed to have you visit us. You're not like other tourists. I just realised you bought that food for a local family. You gave money to them." To the monk. It was a really good donation, and he literally got on his hands and knees and did like a praying symbol to me for gratitude that Sri Lanka was so lucky to have someone as authentic as me visit. And then he sat back in his chair, and then he handed me another drink, and my guard was completely down because it was all really good. And at that moment I thought maybe I was overreacting, like maybe this is just a nice social interaction. Maybe it's not sinister. And I completely dropped my guard and relaxed. And then he handed me another full glass, and I tasted it, and I went, "Oh, that's really strong." I remember hearing myself saying, "That's really strong." It tasted like he'd put a lot more gin in it, but I didn't really think anything sinister because at that point things were going really pleasantly. And I drank half the glass, and then he's like, "Oh, look, full moon, look at the full moon." And he came over and like leaned over. He said, "Look," and there was a beautiful full moon. I said, "Yeah, the full moon's beautiful." And then he stood behind me and he said, "Let me give you head massage." And I froze, and he started massaging my head. And then I feel like caressing on the back of my neck, and I'm like, his hands are on my head. Like, what part of his body is rubbing my neck? And I couldn't really work it out, but it was a very sexual rubbing. And then I thought, I think he's kissing my neck. And as soon as pretty much within like 2 seconds of him touching my neck, me realizing what was going on, I stood up and I said, "No." And he said, "No, it's okay." And he literally like put his hand on my shoulder and sat me back down. And in his usual like very friendly, "I'm doing this to help you." There was nothing. He never once raised his voice to make himself seem like an aggressor or did anything physically forceful to make himself seem like a threat. It was all in the persona of complete friendliness and kindness. And he sat me back down and said, "No, I'll just give you a head massage." And he immediately started massaging my head again, and the neck caressing immediately started up. And I'm just like, oh shit, like I'm in this remote place. I don't know if anyone's around. All the staff have gone home. There's no lights downstairs. No one, I don't know if any other accommodation people are there at the moment. I didn't see who checked into their rooms. And this guy's like got his hands on me and like he could either rape me or strangle me. And so I shot up and I said no, and I ran. I had the door so that it was unlocked, but with the key on the inside, so I could run in and lock it from the inside. And as I did that, I called out, you can stay. And I shut the door. And that was a way of saying, you can stay and have your drink, don't follow me into the room. And I locked the door. And my room was just one bedroom and there were no curtains there. And so he could actually like see straight into my room and onto my bed where I slept. The window was right out next to my bed with no curtains. And so I ran into the bathroom, which was a separate room that had an open ceiling. And so he got his weed out and he was smoking it, and he was incredibly forceful that I smoke his weed. But I just refused over and over and over, even though he kept being really forceful. And I'm just so incredibly grateful I didn't smoke his weed, because I might have lost my senses even more. And I since read that you can put something inside with the weed to subdue you even more. So I'm so glad I didn't take the weed. And then I'm in the bathroom, and so I'm on the top floor of a 2-story building. So if he's pretty fit, he was tall and thin. If he was determined, I'm not sure exactly how far he was going to go or how aggressive he was going to be, but he could have scaled the building and got in. I just hope that he'd had too much to drink and too much weed to manage to do it, or that he wasn't really that evil. But I was laying on the bathroom floor, just absolutely terrified. And then pretty quickly, he sent me a message and said, it's all right, everything's all right. Because we had swapped WhatsApp numbers because he was going to take me to Marissa the next day. And so everyone over there uses WhatsApp and everyone swaps WhatsApp. That's how you make your bookings and communicate with the people who are offering you services. And so then he said, everything's okay. And I'm like, he's still there. And then I heard him try to break into the room. I heard the rattling of the windows and the door, and he was trying to get in. And I was just like, oh shit, like he's trying to get in. And so then I sent a message saying, you need to go to the restaurant now. Because he told me that he wasn't going to drive home, but he was actually going to sleep in the restaurant because he couldn't afford to lose his license if he was done by the police for alcohol in his blood. So he told me he was going to sleep in the restaurant. So I knew he was going to be on the premises. And I said, it's time for you to go to the restaurant in my WhatsApp message. And I've got like the evidence. I've got screenshots of the messages. And then he sent me a message 2 minutes later going, it's okay. And he sent me another message 2 minutes later, everything's all right. And then he sent me another message like 2 minutes later. So he was actually lingering on the veranda, probably looking into the room while he was staying there like a predator, hoping to get to me.
Wow, that's terrifying. So what happened? You stayed the rest of the night on the bathroom floor, locked in the bathroom?
Yeah, pretty much. So I was on the bathroom floor and there were mosquitoes attacking me, and dengue fever is definitely a real threat on that part of the coast. So I could have got dengue fever, which is like a really, really bad disease. And I was completely terrified because I didn't know. I didn't hear him leave. I don't know. He eventually, like 9 minutes later, sent me a message. It's okay, you want me to go to the restaurant. And so he might have left then, or he might have been hovering around the door waiting for me to open it. I don't know. And then I was just on the bathroom floor and I was like, you know what? I want a record of this. If he comes back and murders me, I want people to know what happened. So as I'm laying on the bathroom floor, I actually did a video of myself and I posted it to social media. So there was evidence of what happened. And while I'm laying on the floor, I'm getting all people who are awake at that time of night, like offering me support and suggestions, my followers. So it was quite the crisis. So like this is live and my followers are like seeing me on the floor, like with someone like trying to break in and offering me support. And then like the toilet's there and I've had all this tonic. So I get up to go to the toilet and I get this like incredible like dizzy spell and I can almost not even sit up and I have to lay on the floor again. I'm incapable of even sitting. So either he put a lot of alcohol in my drink to get me drunk, or he spiked my drink. I'm more inclined to maybe think he spiked my drink because there was like a half-hour gap between, or maybe more, before the dizziness kicked in. I personally think if it's alcohol, it might kick in quicker, but I don't know. Either way, the fact that I was on the bathroom floor, not able to stand, with a man trying to break into my room, it was all his fault. He set up the scenario. He targeted me. He had the intention to make this happen. Well, he did more. He wanted to be in the room with me. So I think he intended to seduce me if I didn't go willingly. It's not that unlikely that he wouldn't have raped me, and highly likely he would have also robbed me. And so it's all pretty absolutely terrifying. And I didn't know if he could access a key because he worked for them. So I don't know what role he had, but luckily I think he's pretty low down in the pecking order there, so he didn't have access to a key, but that was just my luck that he didn't have access to a key. Yeah, so then after at about like 4 a.m, I moved to the bedroom and I tucked myself behind the door in case he tried to come in. Then I'm like, well, at least I'm blocking the door with my body. And then I was just waiting all night. I think I maybe got 1 hour sleep between about 4 and 5. And then I decided my plan was to escape before he woke up in the restaurant. So I was like keeping myself awake so that as soon as the sun came up, I could make my escape down the beach and get away.
So what happened when the sun came up?
Yeah, so as soon as the sun came up, I actually had fallen asleep for an hour. So when I woke, the sun was up and I'm like, oh, the sun's already up. I hope he hasn't woken. And so I actually left money for my Tuk Tuk tour on the table. How nice is that? Because I owed him like $20 for the tour. So I left that on the table with a little note, Tuk Tuk, and I got all my bags. And as well as my 3 bags, I also had a big bag of groceries that I'd bought for the local family. And I'd made a promise to them that I would meet them for breakfast and I would bring breakfast. So I made this commitment for the next morning. So I'm literally like, I can barely walk. I'm so exhausted, and your feet sinks into sand, and I'm carrying all this weight. So I didn't want to go the front way because he would have seen me. If he was awake, he would have seen me going through the front exit from the restaurant. So I found this sneaky passage to the beach where you couldn't see from the restaurant. And I've got my 4 bags and my feet are sinking in. I'm like sweating. It's hot. I'm exhausted. Feral rabies dogs are like coming up trying to get me, and I'm like kind of spinning my bags around trying to stop them getting me because I'd already been scratched and licked by a dog earlier in the trip and ended up in hospital getting tetanus shot. Luckily, the dog earlier had been vaccinated for rabies, but these dogs on the beach clearly were rabies dogs. But if you are too aggressive, then you'll make them more angry and they will go for you. So I'm like trying to stop them getting too close, but trying not to aggravate them. And I can barely walk. And I'm looking back over my shoulder to make sure he's not following me. And it was terrifying. And at one point I had to climb up these rocks and I couldn't even get up the rocks. And there were some tourist girls there. I'm like, can you please just lift my bags up the rocks for me? I couldn't even climb up. I could just barely walk. And my bags were so heavy. And then there's a lot of restaurants along the strip going back toward the town, and I found a restaurant where you couldn't really see in from the beach and you couldn't see in from the road that went past the front, and I kind of hid in there really early. The restaurant wasn't even really open. They were still sweeping. It was like 6 a.m. And I just sought solace in there. And then I did another video showing that I'd escaped, and I had to wait. That I'd arranged to meet the family, the dad, at 8 o'clock. So I kind of had to wait to 8 o'clock because I didn't have their phone number or anything. And I just, even though everything so dramatic had happened and my life was in jeopardy, I could not bring it to myself to stand this family up who I had just met the day before and had 2 beautiful hours with, and I'd played with their kids and I'd promised them I would bring them breakfast the next day. I just couldn't bring it to myself to stand them up. So I hovered around until 8 o'clock to try to meet them.
And you did catch up with them, did you?
Well, we arranged to meet at this spot about 300 metres from my resort. And so I got a tuk-tuk driver and I kept telling the people, because I had this guy's name, make sure it's not the tuk-tuk driver from the accommodation up there. Make sure it's not this guy's name. And they're like, no, it won't be him. And so another person came at 8 o'clock and I'm like, I arranged to meet someone just here. And he didn't show. He wasn't there. And I'm like, maybe he actually went up to the resort instead of the meeting place we arranged a few hundred metres away, because the road was really bad. So we arranged to meet before the damaged road. And I couldn't go back to the resort to look for him in case that's what he'd done, because I would go back into like my tuk-tuk guy. And so it was really awkward. And then after half an hour, and every time someone went past, I'm actually literally hiding in the back of the tuk-tuk and putting my scarf over my head so no one can see me in case my predator like goes past or is looking for me. And then eventually what I did is I actually took a photo of the dad the day before with his daughter, because they were such a lovely family and I was going to meet them again. I'm like, can I take a photo? And so I actually had a photo, and I'd shown Tuk Tuk Man the photo, but I also showed other people along the street and said, I've arranged to meet these people. Do you know where they live? And someone knew the family. And so then they told my new driver, where to go. And my new driver took me to the family. But yeah, the drama wasn't really over at that point because I was still in town.
Yeah, so how did you resolve this? This was towards the end of your trip?
Yeah, it was like only 2 days to go.
Right, so how did you extricate yourself?
Well, when I got back to the family's house, I thought, and I remember we really bonded. Like, this family was just exquisite. The mother and the father and the children. I don't think I've seen a family that has that much love and appreciation for each other. Like, the way they looked at each other, they loved each other so much, and they were so welcoming of me, and it was really, really beautiful. And I was actually planning to leave at 10 o'clock, so I was going to just have breakfast with them and leave. And then they pleaded, the mother literally was pleading with me to stay overnight with them, to spend the day and stay overnight. And I actually wanted to go. And I remember sending you a message and going, should I leave, or like, should I stay with this family? Like, I don't know what to do. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, but I really should be trying to get out of town. And at that point, we both, I think, thought I was safe and I was away from the guy, and it was over. It was over. I hadn't complained to them. I hadn't provoked them. I left money for the tuk-tuk. I had just disappeared. And so at that point, in making the decision, I think we both thought the danger was behind us. And yeah, we agreed that I would actually spend the night with the family. So I'd spend the day and spend the night with the family and have this once in a lifetime opportunity of being with a beautiful family that was absolutely poverty stricken. And I agreed to spend the day with them and stay overnight in their house. And they were ecstatic. She was like jumping up and down. She was absolutely over the moon that I decided to spend the day with them and stay overnight. But then after that, it was the weekend, and they wanted to take the children to the beach. And this made me really uncomfortable because the strip of beach, there's only one strip of beach, and it was the beach where I had just escaped from. And I was like, oh God, what are we? And I kept like talking about, I'm like, Tuk Tuk Man might see me. I kept calling him Tuk Tuk Man. And every time I talked about Tuk Tuk Man, they laughed. They thought it was funny that I was frightened and that there was nothing to be frightened of, and everything was totally fine, and that it was just like a crazy joke that I'd be frightened that Tuk Tuk Man was going to come after me. Although they were pretty mortified at what happened the night before, but they thought it was just completely impossible that this man would pursue me or cause me any other danger. They laughed and laughed and laughed. Anyway, so I didn't really have a choice at this stage. I was in a remote area outside of town. I didn't know how to make a phone call. I didn't know how to call a tuk-tuk. And so I kind of trapped myself with this family. And then we went to the beach, and I'm like, Tuk Tuk Man might see me. Tuk Tuk Man might see me. And they're laughing. And so he's only got an old motorbike. So he takes half the family to the beach, leaves me with the kids, and then comes back and gets me and one of the other children. And literally, like, as we were like a few hundred meters from his house, and I passed Tuk Tuk Man on his motorbike, and my arm is on his side showing my tattoo. Like, there's no way that I could have hidden from him. And I was just going, oh shit, like Tuk Tuk Man has just come looking for me. He probably knows I'm staying at their house because I showed him the photo the day before. I told him I was having breakfast with them, and now he's coming looking for me. And I was absolutely terrified. Anyway, the dad kept going to the beach, and I kept looking over, and he wasn't behind me, so that was good. Another time I heard a tuk-tuk beeping, going beep, 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 and I think another time he actually saw me on the back of the motorbike and was trying to get us to stop, but again, the dad just kept going, and he didn't end up being able to pursue us. The roads were quite narrow. And then we get to the beach, And I'm like, don't go anywhere near the resort, nowhere near the resort. And so we're maybe like 400, maybe a kilometre away actually down the beach from the resort. And we're sitting on the beach and I'm really quite worried. And then the kids are all playing and laughing. I'll post some photos in my blog posts. Like the photos are just exquisite. They're just playing and having a hoot on the beach. And then and then I decide to check my emails while they're playing. They want me to go for a swim, but I'm too distressed to go for a swim. I'm just sitting on the beach. I check my emails and there's an email from the resort saying, if you don't pay your bill, we're going to report you to the police. And then I replied and said, I had to flee for my own safety. I will tell you what happened when I feel safe. And then I saw another email and it said, we have reported you to the police. You cannot leave the country. And so here I am with Tuk Tuk Man looking like he's pursuing me. The resort with a horrible receptionist has reported me to the police. And if I go to the airport, I'm going to be held by the police and I won't be able to leave. And I've been passively kidnapped by my beautiful family who will not let me leave. And in amongst this like paradisic setting with like children playing and splashing in the waves. And it was just like unbelievably distressing and stressful. And I felt so in danger.
How did you move forward? How did you get out of this situation? Because I discovered things about afterwards that makes me think that messages to you were a bluff, because it seems like there's something quite shady about that place.
Well, yes, there's something shady. No, I don't actually think it was a bluff. So I'm getting advice from everyone. So I'm pretty much got my social media team. I'm messaging you. I've done a screenshot of the post on social media and like my followers are all like telling me, giving me advice, go to the embassy, don't pay the bill. But like, I don't want to be stuck in a country where people could be, like he smoked weed, which is illegal there. They have the death penalty for drug trafficking, but like, I didn't know if he'd turn it around and say that I ordered the weed. I didn't want to be put in a position where they tried to reciprocate and accuse me of anything and I got stuck in the country. I'd heard there's an incredible amount of corruption within the police. I was told that by local Sri Lankan people all the time. So that wasn't an option. So then I thought, well, okay, like I shouldn't have to pay for a night that I spent on the bathroom floor terrified. But at this point in time, all I want to do is remove the police ban on me leaving the country so that I can leave. And so I did something incredibly cruel. I said to my family, can you please go pay my bill? I'd actually paid for the first night and I'd paid for the tuk-tuk. I just hadn't paid for the second night because I escaped before reception opened, and why the hell should I pay for a night like that anyway? And I had what was like maybe $150. And this family had nothing. They had no money. They could not pay the water. They could not pay the rent. They could not buy food. It was like such a cruel thing to do, to then give them all this money to go pay for like my hotel bill. But I felt I had no choice. Like my life was on the line possibly at that stage. And they willingly went and paid the bill. Now, I had not told the resort what had happened because I didn't want to dob in Tuk Tuk Man while I was in town. I did not want him to retaliate and try anything back on me. But the family, to defend my honour, when they paid the bill, they told the receptionist what had happened with Tuk Tuk Man trying to get into my room. And they said they actually knew the receptionist and were friends with her. And she said, oh, well, we're going to sack him. And so then, okay, well, I've had the dad said he himself was with the receptionist and he phoned the police and he had the police ban and report removed and retracted. So it does actually seem like they did report me because he said he actually was there when he did actually himself remove it. And so then, okay, they fixed the problem of me not being able to leave the country and the police report, but then I had just got this guy sacked and he told me he really needed the money. So now I'm like in town and the family won't let me leave. And at this point when the family came back, I'm like, well, thank you very much. I gave them the change that the resort gave me and I'm like, I have to leave. I have to leave town now. I'm in danger. It's not safe. You have children. I don't want to be in your house and be attracting danger into your house with your beautiful children. This is a very dangerous situation. I'm not safe. I have to leave now. And they just laughed their heads off like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard in their life.
You ended up spending a couple more days with them?
When we'd gone on the motorbike to go to the beach, like feral rabies dogs were trying to get us. So like there was no way for me to escape. And Tuk Tuk Man had been on a nearby road. So I didn't know how to phone the police, not that I would have anyway, because they're corrupt. And Tuk Tuk Man said he had a huge family that was well known in the community. So I would have just been leading them to me. I couldn't walk to town because Tuk Tuk Man might see me and the rabies dogs might get me. And there was no way for me to leave. And my bags were too heavy. I was trapped and they refused to let me go. It was exactly the same as like on the Tuk Tuk when he said he was going to give me a party. And I said, no, I don't want that to happen. It was exactly the same environment when I was with my absolutely beautiful family who I adored. But they're like, you are staying and you are going to stay the night and we are going to have an awesome time and you're not leaving, and just laughing through the whole thing. Yeah. And so I was trapped there and I was terrified. It was this complex situation of playing with the kids, laughing, teaching them English, looking at their drawings, while being absolutely terrified that like this Tuk Tuk Man's going to come and get me. And whenever I say I'm worried about Tuk Tuk Man, they'd laugh. And the dad, he was really skinny, but he was so proud of his home. And he was like, this is my property. If anyone comes here, I'm going to guard it and I'm going to defend us all. And he was like, I won't let anyone hurt any of us. I'm like, oh my God, like we don't know what these people are capable of. And, you know, I'm helping the mother and like she's cooking beauty. And then I give them money. They don't even have money for food. She said, can you help me? And so I gave her like $30 and they went and bought groceries. And then they brought, she made this absolutely beautiful meal and he kept like getting coconuts from the tree and giving me coconuts, and I'd use my reusable straw. And then we're playing with the kids and then I'm absolutely terrified. And then I'm saying, I've got to leave. I'm not safe. And then they're laughing, and it was this complex, like you could make a movie about the complexity and intensity of the situation. It was like bizarre. It was like almost unbelievable. I couldn't go. There was no way for me to go. I had absolutely been passively kidnapped by the nicest possible people. And I swear I heard someone trying to pick the lock from the front door and walking around the house at night, and it wasn't too hard for them to work out where I was. So I do think Tuk Tuk Man tried to come, but he just didn't break in because he was on his own. I think he was trying to passively break in. I was terrified, and that was a second night I didn't get any sleep.
Then the next day though, you were able to leave.
Yeah, because I had booked the driver the previous day to come and get me. So I knew he was coming at 10 o'clock and that was the only way that I could leave. And the family had, as beautiful as they were absolutely poverty-stricken and completely desperate. And the conversation kept cycling back to money and them wanting me to give them money. So add that to the complexity of playing with the kids, having a really fun time, laughing, terror, while they're talking constantly about me giving them money and getting my friends to give them money, and like me even funding for them to set up to build a building so she can run a bed and breakfast. And I'm like, she's like, oh, this is an old house. And I'm like, I rent an old house just like you're renting an old house. But nothing I said would sink in and stop the requests for money. It was very distressing. I don't think Australians like being asked for money. We like to give and we like to have our generosity appreciated, but we find it upsetting to be asked. I think maybe that's a cultural thing, but in their culture, maybe it's just quite normal. And for them, it's like I was their best chance out of poverty. So why not try to save their family? Why not try to put shoes on their kids' feet and food on the table? Like, it's a logical thing for them to do. But then actually something did happen just before I left. Like, it was like 8:30 in the morning that I was going to leave, and she'd been telling me that they can't pay the rent. They haven't paid the rent for ages. Like, I could see there was nothing in the kitchen, like not even any serving spoons, and the plates they eat off are like a few broken plastic plates that we would bin. Like, they had nothing. And she showed me the water bill, and they hadn't been able to pay it for something like 9 months, and it had been accumulating and they got the final notice, and you could see it in red writing, and the date the water was going to be cut off was about 3 days away. So this divine family that had given me this very rich experience, cooked for me, picked coconuts from the tree, I'd bonded with the kids. They were about to have no water in 3 days. Now, you can't function with no water. You need water. It's a basic survival. You need it for basic survival. So, and I said to them, well, maybe you can just put a little bit of money toward it and get an extension. And they said there's no partial payments. You can't partially pay the bill. You have to pay the entire amount. And you will recall at that point I sent you a message and I said their water's about to be cut off. How do you feel about paying their water bill? And you were very supportive. It was probably about 50 Australian dollars, and I didn't want to give them cash, and it was Sunday, so in Australia you can't go to an office, and they didn't have a computer or phone to do it online. And I said, is there any way that we can pay this bill today? And to pay the bill, you actually go to the local supermarket and the teller pays it. And I said, okay, right, let's go. And so it was Operation Save Water. And so I got the dad to take me. We went to the ATM, I got cash out, and we went to the supermarket and I handed them the bill myself, paid it in full, which should give them another maybe 8 or 9 months with water before it's going to be cut off again. And then she had said that 2 of the children, there were 2 basic school books they didn't have. So then he took me to an educational store and it was about $3 each. One of the kids needed a maths book, another one needed, I think it was an English book. And these are basic things and they can't even afford school shoes. They can't afford anything. It was just dire. But I was also determined not to start handing over cash, especially because they were asking for it. I didn't want them to think that I was the answer to their financial problems, but I really was happy to be able to pay the water bill for them. Yeah, so that actually felt really good.
Yeah, that was really generous. So despite dire traumatic situation, looking for opportunities to help people. When you did eventually leave Sri Lanka, though, you did find out a lot more about this place you were staying at.
Yeah, so there's actually a little bit more of the story which we'll come back to in the day after I left. But yeah, after I returned home, I had decided at that point that I was out of the country, I was safe. And the owner actually sent me a message, an email, and said, I'm the owner. Tell me what happened. And I'm like, I will tell you when I feel safe. And he sent me another message and said, I will meet you anywhere before you leave. And I'm like, no effing way am I going to meet some strange guy in some country to try and resolve some complaint about his accommodation. I don't know who the hell you are or what you're capable of. So it was a logical thing to not agree to that meeting. And it was a very, very, very good thing I did not agree to the meeting, or I might be dead now. After I came back and I started formalising my complaint to the resort, I decided to do some research on them, and I found out some mortifying experiences that guests had there. So TripAdvisor, I think, is in chronological order of reviews. So people review and it gets pushed down in the timeline, so you don't get to see a lot of them. You only see the recent ones. And Booking.com, who I booked through, they have excellent, great, okay, good, poor. And if I've got this right, all the good reviews appear first. So you see all the wonderful experiences. And it's not unless you go searching for the poor reviews do you find the bad ones. And I always thought the poor reviews were just people who were whingers and the opposition who were trying to badmouth their opposition. But I've completely changed my perspective now and believe the poor reviews are true, and you should actually be reading those well before you read the good reviews. And these poor reviews date back to 2011, and the receptionist is awful, and she's been awful for a long time, and they overcharge people. And the owner is actually her brother, and he's a psychopath and he's a local thug. And it seems, I don't know if he sells drugs as well, but it seems he definitely takes them, so he's unhinged. And he's a violent, and anyone who complains, he tries to attack and beat up. And he also carries a knife, and some of the staff members carry knives. And sometimes they all gang up together against the complaining guest. They even lock the gates and lock people in. They say he's got a knife. and threaten that someone else has a knife. And yes, they do carry knives. Some guests had to be taken to the doctor because they'd been beaten up so badly. Other times the owner tried to kill the guests and the staff had to intervene and hold him back. And one of the most mortifying reviews was someone was complaining about the condition of the room and there was blood all over the walls. So I'm pretty sure they have actually killed guests in their room. Can you just comprehend that? A woman on my own in a room in the cabana with one of their staff members trying to break into my room.
Yeah, so this is incredible. So there are people right now planning their trips. They're looking at these sites, these travel aggregation sites such as Booking.com, TripAdvisor. But unless they read all these reviews, they would just look at the photos.
Good reviews that pop up the top, yeah.
And so it seems to me that these sites who are getting paid, these businesses, I'll just come out and say it, they don't really seem to care about this. So they actually have properties that come up in their search results that are really, they're like the Bates Motel.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to decide how to pursue this, because not only am I seeking vindication for what happened to me, I'm now trying to understand and prevent this from happening to other people. I was completely innocent and I survived because I got out on wits and I didn't confront them. If I had confronted them, I could have had my throat slashed. And so what about other people who don't escape so well and who don't read those bad reviews and are overcharged, or the food is bad, like many of the complaints were, and then they are physically assaulted by the owner or threatened to be physically assaulted? How unfair is that Booking.com, yes, I'm pointing my finger at you, absolutely. And at TripAdvisor, they say they allow everyone to have a listing because then the bad reviews are available. But my argument with that is, how do people know which reviews are bad or what bad things have happened if it's just pushed down in the timeline? And Booking.com, how are they allowing these businesses to operate when there's known to be unsafe behaviour repeatedly on the property by managers and staff? I really think we should all kind of rise up in mass protest against this to protect innocent people from environments like this. So I'm trying to work out exactly what I want. I want this business to be pulled from Booking.com, but then they could just rename and come back again. If there's been a police report by guests against a place, and this place has had lots of police reports against them, the police know very well about them, that there should be some kind of a warning symbol with the listing to go, unsafe behaviour has been reported at this accommodation, and you can click on that and you can read the reviews of the unsafe behaviour that's been reported or what police reports have been reported on the accommodation. I really think that should be essential on these platforms. So I'm not quite sure how to go about fighting for this at the moment, because I'm an anti-plastic person, and although a lot of my followers are pro-justice, this is not why they're following me. So I'm not quite sure.
Well, my recommendation is not to even bother with these places like Booking.com and TripAdvisor. They're unaccountable. Their success has really made them a law unto themselves. I'm just going to be blunt about that. My recommendation to you should just write a kick-ass blog article about this, try and get attention on that, and then you control it. It's media you own. You're not negotiating with a completely unaccountable monolithic entity. And I really feel that you should name and shame this place.
Yeah, well, two things is that, yes, I really think that's a good idea with the blog post, but I'm 100% relying on people to support it to make it happen. It will only be effective if thousands of people share it, and I don't know if I've got enough following to make that happen. And naming the place, this guy's a violent criminal. I don't know how far his knife holding hands can reach, and if he will seek revenge on me. honestly. I don't know if I will be safe.
Yeah, it's a good question, but I feel quite passionately about this, and I think this would be an interesting experiment. How well would this blog post do for you? Because it's not just you seeking retribution for your poor treatment. Fact is, there are a lot of women who choose to travel on their own because, why shouldn't they be able to travel on their own? But the experience they have when they go doesn't even have to be a different country. It could just be a venue within their own country. Quite often the experience they have on their own is completely different to the experience they would have if they were traveling with someone else.
Yeah, that's true. And, you're right. Like what happened to me is now kind of 10% of like my mission. My mission is for justice and to prevent this happening to endless other innocent people who might not get out of it as unscathed as I did. But I would like to end on a positive note. So can I tell the last part of the story of my holiday?
Absolutely.
So I get my tuk-tuk and I go to a place called Gaul, which there's an old fort there and it's a bit dusty, and I had this cute cabana for $10 a night, but it was noisy. There were fireworks and a club, and I'm laying in there. I'm still quite scared because my tuk-tuk driver's from Tengol. He knows where I'm staying, and I'm like, don't tell anyone where I'm staying. Do not tell anyone. It's like I was trying to escape the mafia, and there were breadcrumbs, and I didn't know who was going to whisper to who where I was staying. So, and this cabana was kind of open at the top, like there were big few inch gaps between the wood, and I'm laying in the bed like waiting for like Tuk Tuk Man for his face to like appear over my little vibrant pink hut. And I was really scared, but at the same time, this like network started to like hum into activity. And my beautiful driver, Guni, who I'd had for 4 days, he was so protective and so kind of me. And he'd said, if you need any help, let me know. And so I messaged him with what had happened, and he was completely mortified. And he's like, go to the police, tell me the name of the place. You've got to report this. He wanted to rescue me, but he's a driver and he was in the middle of a tour, like 5 hours away, and he was like booked for days, and he was like apologizing that he couldn't come and save me, and he's ringing around trying to find other drivers to save me. And my beautiful follower, who had allowed her husband to take me out for lunch, and he himself were messaging me. So I had Guni, the man from Colombo, and his wife all messaging me, all trying to go, what can we do? Are you safe? Are you okay? So sorry this happened to you. Is there anything we can do? And I said, the only thing that I need is safe passage to my final night's accommodation, which was the same place I stayed on my first night. And so then they all went into a frenzy of activity trying to find me a safe driver. And I was getting message after message after message, my phone. So I'm laying in this hut, this bright pink hut, terrified. There are like explosions of fireworks, club music just beating, and my phone like just going crazy. And all these people started messaging me, and they've all got Sri Lankan names, and I don't know who any of them are. And it's one message after, and they're like, oh, so-and-so told me you needed a lift. So-and-so told me you needed you a lift. And then I got a message from the family I just left. Oh, she's waiting at someone's house. You've got to call her. I think she was going to ask for money. And all this like activities happening. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. And half the messages I didn't reply because I didn't know who the hell they were. But what had happened is one person had asked another person, and they'd taken it upon themselves to find me a driver, and they couldn't find someone. So the person they asked was looking for a driver. And by the time it was like the fifth person removed finally like contacted me and said, oh, I'm in Gaul. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like you can pick me up tomorrow. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not actually the driver. I'm just in Gaul and I'm going to arrange the driver. And so this network of people I'd never met, coming from a few people I had only met for a brief period of time, just basically were like surrounding me like this protective hive of beauty and kindness from strangers, all wanting to save me and provide me with a safe journey to my last destination. So that was like just as intense and overwhelming in a good way compared to like the threat and fear I had felt before. And they did actually eventually arrange a driver for me to get safe passage just for the last part of my journey. And they dropped me off. It was the same accommodation I stayed at the first few nights. And I had actually arranged to visit some old people. The wife, her mother is a volunteer for an aged care group, social group, and we'd arranged to get together, and it had rained the night we arranged it. And so they postponed it to my last night. So I've just been through all this. I basically haven't slept for 3 nights. I've had 3 of the most intense days of my life. I get to my last night and all I want to do is hide, and I'm now booked myself to go to a social gathering that has been arranged purely as me being the guest of honor. And I'm like, I can't not go. And I went, and it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And they were a group of, I haven't even told you this, really, really poor people who lived in the community. And once a month they get together. And I went around and I held everyone's hand and we exchanged. I was hilarious because they all have like English name, Western names like Margaret and Irene. I was just laughing at one point, 2 sisters were both called Margaret. I'm like, how does that work? And 3 ladies in a row were called Margaret, and we were just laughing and playing, and then we were dancing, and then they were singing, and then I told them about my experience of swimming with whales in Tonga. And the lady who was hosting it was translating. So I'd say a few words and then she'd translate into Sri Lankan. And like I was crying and people were like taking their glasses off and like drying their eyes. And they were just so happy that I spent the time with them and had company with them and showed them that they were valuable people. And it was... They were so happy and I was so happy. It was the most exquisite end to my time in Sri Lanka.
Wow, that's so you that you had that experience, but I'm not surprised. And that's an excellent end to your trip. So, Anita, do you have any advice, like a concise piece of advice you could give other travellers, particularly women travellers travelling on their own?
I would never have said this in the past and I didn't do it myself, but if you can become comfortable with one lie, that you are travelling with a male companion who's your really big boyfriend and he's waiting for you at your destination and you're going to be dropped off to meet him, or he's about to meet you, or he's just up there. The local men tend to leave you alone because they do have a lot of Buddhism morals, and so if they know that you're in a relationship, they'll stop pursuing you, or even to know that you've got someone expecting you. That's enough to put them off. So that can actually be a big protection. Make out that you've got a male companion nearby or that you're married. Though that didn't stop Tuk Tuk Man. I told him I was married and had my ring. And absolutely, I've completely changed my view now. You should read the worst reviews. Read the poor and the terrible reviews first. Read all those before you even look at the good reviews. And don't stay anywhere that there's any indication of unsafe behaviour. And then read the good reviews. And if you see places that seem really safe to you, choose those places. And I actually preferred my experiences with Airbnb because I was going into people's homes, and the other people who had left reviews were people who had stayed in the homes and had really good experiences. So you could tell how other people were treated in that person's home. So I found Airbnb suited me as a solo female traveller. If you stay with a family or a married couple, don't stay with single men. And then they want your money and they want good reviews. So they're going to care for you and they're going to keep you safe, and they will take it upon themselves to protect you and make sure you have safe passage to them and safe passage to your next destination. So stay with a really caring family that has really good reviews, or a married couple where the woman is one of the main people involved in your stay.
Excellent advice, and that would actually make a fantastic conclusion. Okay, Anita, if people want to find out more about you and your adventures, where can they find you?
Facebook is my most active anti-plastic page, so it's Anita from Australia. I do share some personal things there as well, so it's highly entertaining. And Instagram, again, is Anita from Australia. It's just as active, but I share more long forms on Facebook and also LinkedIn and Twitter, which you've controlled my handles. What are my handles for LinkedIn and Twitter?
Oh, just look up Anita Horan, plastic-free produce campaigner. Twitter, you can look up Anita Horan, but the handle is Anita from Oz, but AUS, so Anita from AUS.
I have written 2 books, so they are really important to me. They've taken a long time. They're highly entertaining. They're both pretty short, and they're ebooks available on Amazon. One is called Is This Me?, which is part 1 of a series about my life, and also the other one is called Plastic Girl, which is my entertaining journey into becoming an anti-plastic activist.
Excellent. Thank you for your time, Anita. I, of course, am Timbo. I can be found on Twitter and Instagram, Timbo Horan, TimboHoran. And until next time, Anita.
Thank you, Tim.